Welcome everyone to Stage Right. I'm your host, Sierra Haynes. My goal is to bring you along on a journey inside the minds and lives of some of Canada's most exciting playwrights. I've interviewed 5 playwrights that I've been curious to speak with, and now those playwrights are back and have picked other writers that they want to get curious with. Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. Whatever you're doing, we've got a story for you. This is Stage Right. This episode, I'm so glad to be sitting down again with Jennifer Dawn Bishop. Jennifer has invited playwright Keith Barker to Stage Right. This conversation was honestly such an insightful joy to be part of. Speaking with Keith and Jennifer, you could definitely see their friendship and admiration. By the time I got to this interview throughout this process, it was really starting to hit me just how interconnected our theater community is across this country. As a recent theater school grad, you can feel like you're walking into a big world after the time in your creative incubator is over. It's conversations like this one that help you to remember that everyone starts off small, confused, and maybe going to journalism school just to get their parents off their back about getting a proper education before pursuing such an ambitious and undefinable career in the arts. Keith Barker is a member of the Métis Nation of Ontario. He is a playwright, actor, and theater director from Northwestern Ontario and the outgoing artistic director at Native Earth Performing Arts in Toronto. Winner of the Dora Mavor Moore Award and the Playwrights Guild Carol Bolt Award for Best New Play, he was also finalist for the Governor General's Award for English Drama in 2018 for his play, This Is How We Got Here. Keith received a Saskatchewan and Area Theatre Award for Excellence in Playwriting for his play, The Hours That Remain, as well as a Yukon Arts Award for Best Art for Social Change. Now, Keith is the incoming director of new play development over at the Stratford Festival. In today's conversation, we'll talk about decolonizing theatre practices, writing a children's book, and endings to plays he just couldn't part with. As usual, I like to give you all some show summaries so that you know what we're talking about when we get there. I would like to put a disclaimer. One of the shows discusses a family's grieving process after a suicide. If you're thinking about suicide or are worried about a friend or loved one, there are resources available to help. Call the Canadian Suicide Prevention Service at 1-833-456-4566 or go to their website at www.crisisservicecanada.ca. Here are the show summaries. This is how we got here. It's been a year since Paul and Lucille's son Craig died by suicide, and their once solid family bonds are starting to break down. While the now separated couple tries to honor their son, Lucille's sister Lisette and her husband Jim refuse to discuss their nephew. The ties that keep the four together as sisters, best friends, and spouses are strained by grief and guilt, until a visit from a fox changes everything. The Hours That Remain. Denise has spent the last 5 years dedicated to uncovering the truth behind her sister Michelle's disappearance. Haunted by loose ends, she begins seeing visions of Michelle, who gradually guides her in the right direction. As Denise's marriage and sanity crumble around her, she remains committed to unearthing an unfathomable truth and coming to terms with a painfully crucial realization, one she has been desperately avoiding. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to have another great conversation with Jennifer Dawn Bishop today. And Jennifer, you've invited a guest. Do you mind introducing your guest for us?
Yes. And thank you for having me back. And also just thank you for holding space for these wonderful informal conversations. And I would like to introduce playwright, director, and just amazing human in general, Keith Barker.
Hi. Hello. It's my pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, actually, how we first met was through an opportunity that our company was doing at the time when we were Saskatchewan Native Theatre Company, when we were called that. And they had this opportunity for 3 artists to mentor in Toronto on your show, Keith's show, The Hours That Remain. And I just wanted to so much meet this guy that I didn't know yet when they had said that we have this opportunity coming up and we'd like you to mentor under the Playwrights. So they gave me a copy of Keith's script, The Hours That Remain. So I just went to the green room, started reading it, started loving it, started crying, and, script drafts never really make me do that. So that was such an instant connection. And I'm like, I got to get out there. I got to meet these amazing people putting this amazing story together. So lo and behold, I was lucky enough to be out in Toronto meeting a bunch of new faces, but also just getting the chance to meet the human that wrote such a powerful piece. And I think this was back in, remind me if I get the dates wrong there. It's 2012, 13-ish, I believe. Keith?
Yeah, in and around there, I think. Yeah, it's, it was one of those, it was my first play, first time it was being produced. Curtis Pitatus was the artistic director at the time. He called me and said he'd read the play, wanted to produce the play. New Harlem Productions with Don and Michelle St. Bernard, they were also producing it. And so we did the production was, we rehearsed it in Toronto and then we brought it to Saskatoon and we did it at the little black box theater there at your theater. And then we brought it back to Toronto. We opened it in Toronto. But, and it was great. We had this opportunity to bring people into the room, and I was a first-time playwright and had never been in that process before. David Storch was directing it, and he was just really great to bring you in, Jennifer. And we just sat side by side while he was working and looking at the script and talking about things. And David had given me a really wide berth of just saying, this is Keith's first play. This is the first time we're doing it. What he needs is we're here to serve him. If he needs something, we're going to try our best to do it and stuff like that. And then you were just kind of a fly on the wall beside me. You were a great comfort because we would talk about the play, talk about what we were seeing. And I wasn't in every rehearsal. So I would leave rehearsals for a couple of days and come in. And David's working with all the actors and I'd, come sit beside you and say, so you and Joseph are there. And I was like, hey, so what's going on? And you two would update me on what was happening. So, yeah. It was an organic thing. Wow. So then when you were still working at Denny's at the time. And so when we came back to Saskatoon, you were great because you told me where to go, what to do. I'd never been. It was just an organic experience for me because you welcomed us so well. And then the whole cast was able to kind of be present in that kind of arts community and to be there. And so it was a really special time for me.
That seems like such an amazing opportunity for the both of you. I mean, having your first play done in such a thorough way. What was that process like for you going through the first time, Keith?
I sweat through my shirt every day. I was just so you feel so vulnerable putting your words up, and it's the first time audiences are going to see it and you don't know how they're going to react, especially an audience out in Saskatoon. I didn't know. But I was really taking care. Everyone was very accommodating. And not that I needed anything, but designers were there. Everybody was. It's one of those amazing things when everyone has the same purpose and we're all driving in the same direction. And in just the camaraderie, the special relationships, we're all excited about sharing this work with people. And I'd done several years of work and was ready. It was ready for an audience. I was ready to just kind of give it over. And so when it happened, it was really, and then to also just be with also people who are new to, Jennifer was looking at directing, looking at playwriting, dramaturgy, and that as well. And so it's great when we're in there together and we're all learning and we're all kind of in different phases, but there was no ego. That was the other thing. The cast, the crew, the everybody. There wasn't a hierarchy. Everybody in the room was the same, and everyone had a voice. I really appreciate it. I think I've carried that forward in everything I've done afterwards, is really try. My intention has always been that now, is that room was so great for me, and I felt like with other people that I feel like that's a really, that kind of safe space and the opportunity to kind of just be yourself in a room when you're creating that kind of work. It only makes things better, so...
I remember my first workshopping process. It felt like I was killing a lot of babies while I was working through my script. What was that like for you both? I mean, how did you deal with that the first time? And then, now you're not a first-time playwright. Do you have any thoughts about that people might be interested in hearing?
Yeah, Jennifer, do you have anything?
I mean, it was such a special experience, and and I know that time has passed since then, but it's such a memorable as you mentioned, organic feeling that I always wanted to carry that with me in a new room. And even with like now that I'm like a little bit more experienced and kind of better at spelling and grammar, it's just like a nice little thing to continue being our authentic self and not this perceived that you gotta put up front this whole other little kind of like side persona where it's not necessarily bad, but you kind of like, depending on the energies of the room or the team you're with, you almost kind of adapt to that atmosphere. And that's not what felt very authentic to me. So just that experience, I still carry with me with a little extra knowledge, but not enough to like climb up my butt and get a big head, so to speak.
But Sierra, like what you're saying about taking, like having the generosity to hear what people are saying about your work and to be able to, like, some people get really defensive about their work, and the idea of everyone's trying to put make the show the best it can be, and so to be open to those things can be an exciting but also humbling experience. Your ego, sometimes you're like, I need to put that aside. So one of the things for me was we had an ending of the play where it was like, I have it here. It said, "We hear the faint sounds of a crowd of people, followed by a burst of celebration." Like when you haven't seen people in a long time and a room full of family and friends, it's like warmth and celebration as we fade to black. And so it was this sense of like, the lights are going down and this woman is crossing over to the other side, and you hear the ancestors and their family come. And it was, and David came to me, it was like the week before we opened, and he's like, the ending doesn't work. I'm really sorry. I know what you're trying to go for. And I was so upset. He's like, it kind of sounds like the TV show Cheers. It's like someone's at the bar and someone walks through and then everyone cheers, and he's like, it just doesn't have the same resonance that I think you're trying to get. So can you think about that? And I went home and I was like, I can't believe that, and what have I done? And this is on. I was like in heartache because it's the ending and you've worked so hard. I really wanted the ending to be uplifting. And then we came back that night and was like, oh, what if it's about, because there's a song at the end, "You're My Sunshine." And it's like, well, what if the song happens and then we hear all, because there's several women in the piece. It's like, what if we start hearing all the women's voices, and they all, like, the one crossing over starts to sing, and from the other side, the women also sing back, and then we hear this like chorus of sounds of everyone singing the song as we end. And I just had that thought, and it came into David, and he was like, that's amazing. Let's try it. And what we actually did is has every woman on the production, like lighting designer, producer, stage manager, Jennifer, like everybody sang a part of "You Are My Sunshine." So the actor on stage started singing it, and then you hear another voice and another voice and another voice. So it was organically shifted. Now, I could have been the playwright that says, no, it has to be this. This was my vision. But I went home that night and came in, and I actually really, when we published the play, we published that ending in the play. And then the optional, and then at the next page over, it says optional ending, and it was the old ending. If you can make it work, I would love you to use it, because that was my original intention. But this is the one that actually worked in the theater on stage. And when it happened, it was, because it also galvanized the whole production. We talk about the numbers and that idea of women's voices and hearing them, and then all of us telling that story together was just...
It is amazing what happens when you are able to go away with somebody's thoughts and come back and find a new solution. Yeah. But I wanted to even ask you about that, because I personally love your optional ending.
Right. I love it too. That's why it's still in the book.
And I thought it was so beautiful the way you described it. I could understand the feeling perfectly reading that. I have it on my list as my number one thing that I was going to talk with you about. I'm so thrilled you brought it up just now. Yeah, but it is amazing what happens when you let someone else's artistic thoughts influence a yes and moment.
Yes. Yeah, and he was...
For yourself as a writer.
Well, and David had so much experience, and so he had tried it. It wasn't that he hadn't tried it. He tried it and was like, I just feel like the note is wrong. Like, we've built this play, it gets to this point that I think it needs something different. And that's someone who's got like the skill set of understanding an audience. I was so grateful because he was so gentle and kind about it. And I went home heartbroken that night, just like, my play is broken. Like, the ending's wrong.
Yeah.
But once I got over that and started thinking, okay, so what are the solutions? And that's part of the work but it still sits there. It's still one of those, that alternative ending is still like, it's such an emotional thing for me. That idea of crossing over and the ancestors cheering you and welcoming you with open arms is, yeah, like it's still emotional to me to this day, just even reading that bit, that I just couldn't.
Absolutely.
When we did the publication of it, like when it got printed, I just was like, it has to be there because the heart of what that story is in those last lines too. So
I think it's great that you kept that in. I'm glad, and I love to hear the backstory about that publication bit too. That's exciting.
Well, and Annie Gibson at Playwrights Canada Press, I just want to say, is like, they were so grateful and kind, and they were like, what do you want? I was like, can I put this? They're like, absolutely, put this in the end. And, and that is also it's one of the gifts that you get when, you have good people that work with you.
That's so lovely. When you came over to Saskatchewan, what's your memories of that time here?
I mean, it was my first production. So the idea that everybody was working on my play and people were coming up it was such a surreal moment. I've been an actor before, and they don't know you until you're on stage, and then they know you and they're like, oh, it was a great play. But everyone in the production, everyone behind the scenes knew that it was my play, and everyone was working really, really hard to make sure, everyone from the front box office to the front of house to the people in the office to the people on stage, everyone is invested in your work. And so it was like one of the greatest feelings. You've done all the hard work, and then suddenly everyone's doing what they can to make it as impactful as possible. And so I just kind of was able to be in the moment. And then Saskatoon, it was, it's a difficult story. We went and walked with their sisters. We went and walked the streets, and Senator Lillian Dick came and spoke to a community, and we just talked about murdered and missing Indigenous women. We walked with community a couple nights before. We were able to offer tickets to people to come see the show. And so there was an extension outside of the play that was also deeply impactful, and everyone was
community engagement.
Yeah, and being invited into those spaces and to share space with people who had lost people and who have friends, family, loved ones missing, and the intention of honoring those stories it was even more important for us to go back and make sure every moment of that play was right and hit the right note and honored everything. And Curtis, to his credit, was like, I want to do a warning before. I want to just say, hey, everyone, this is a very moving piece, but I want to make sure you're in a safe place to receive it. And then afterwards, it's like we have people after on standby and then all that stuff. And so it became about how we support community in telling the story as well. And it was very emotional. Like, I can remember opening night, and when it was over, the actors came out and there was very little clapping. And I was like, sitting, I was in the far right corner, didn't know what was happening, and I was afraid to look over. But when I looked over, people were hugging loved ones beside them. People were embraced and just sitting in their seats. And so we got up and went into the lobby, and then like 15 minutes later, people would start to leave. But it was 20, 25 minutes, people sitting in the theater, just sitting with loved ones, digesting, talking, supporting, talking to each other. And so it was a really... I just had never experienced that before.
Jennifer, were you involved in those bits of in those important pieces of community engagement during that time?
Not as much, sadly, as I had to head back to my favorite job in the whole world, the kitchen. But I tried to at least be at the space as much as possible, trying to catch the shows many times, and just, I don't know, it was comfort and just knowing that I'm there if folks kind of needed something, and just, yeah, it's surreal and just like strange to think about. I would have loved to be in those community engagements, but just I tried to be there as much as possible for sure. Like,
Absolutely.
And just to say that I remember David Storch talking to you, Jennifer, and I love that you took his advice because he was like, you need to leave that job and go be an artist. You are fantastic. You're going to be great. You need to trust it. And you were,
Look at her
she
now.
was like, I just got this job and I don't know. And I've been here a long time. He's like, no, you need to go do this. And you're going to love what you do. And you just kind of got to go for it. And then she did. And it was like, look where she is now, which I think is really exciting. So.
Amazing. I got to have a conversation with Donna Michelle
nice.
and of course New Harlem Productions. That's her production company. And yeah, she spoke so much to what it means to give back to the community in a full way that actually serves the community and is not just serving yourself or the production in a weird way. And I think that I can see that idea in what you were speaking about, going into the community and making sure there's supports and walking with and spending time.
Yeah, Donna was my champion. Like, when I didn't think I was a playwright, Donna was like, you're a playwright. We're producing this play. This play is going to... She handed my play to a publisher, Playwrights Canada Press. The only reason they read it is because Donna went, hey, you need to read this play. And all the work that she does, you know, the play is the play, and then the work she does around these plays with her company, New Harlem Productions, and with her work in particular, is always, it just raised the bar for me about what is our responsibility, but also what we can do to be better and how we can support. We want to have these conversations, and we want it to be great art, and we want to put these things on stage. And so to me, those don't have to be separate. It can all happen at the same time. And Donna she always finds really smart ways to engage and to bring people to the table and voices that have, you know, historically been marginalized or have not felt welcome in these spaces. And I am forever grateful for those teachings, and I try to carry them along. Like, still Donna Michelle, I'm her biggest fan. She is still one of my most favorite people in the world, and she has taught me so much about how to do things right in these times. So.
Moving a little bit away from your playwriting directly, I always love to ask the question, what was your first experience in a theater?
Sure. I grew up in Northwestern Ontario. There was no theater in my town. I didn't see a live play until I think I was 17. My mom took me to my first play, and it was at Magnus Theatre in Thunder Bay. And it was just mind-blowing. I didn't know what was happening. Like, I couldn't believe that someone did this for a living. I also remember, I went to George Brown Theatre School, and I was very young, very naive. I hadn't read a lot of plays, but I auditioned and got into the school. And one of the first weeks at theater school, they take you to the Shaw Festival, and they take you to the Stratford Festival, and they show you a production, because it's a classical training theater program. Very colonial. And I was there, and I had never been in a fancy theater like that before, ever in my life. And I watched the play, and when it's over, I reacted like I was at a hockey game. I'm hooting and hollering, clapping, just yelling things out. I was at a hockey game, like I was at a sports event. And I remember I wasn't thinking, it just happened. Like, I was just super excited. I hadn't seen anything like this before. And when I looked over, people were shocked and dismayed, and teachers were embarrassed. And a teacher said to me afterwards, like, that's not how we act in a theater, Keith. And I remember being so embarrassed and felt shamed about, like, it was just, people thought I was trying to put something on. I actually didn't know how to react. I really, honestly and humbly did not know that we were just supposed to do these and stand up. Like, I thought when you were excited and you loved, my favorite actor came out in the play, and I was like, yeah, you're the best, and didn't realize until the end that, and then I felt like I was judged after that of, like, not being cultured And so I think it's always been, years later, Magnus did my play. And so the idea of like the cyclical nature of like, you start there, you see your first play as a young person. It's the only theater in Northwestern Ontario. The next one is in Winnipeg, and then the other one's in Sudbury. It's like kind of an oasis in a very large, area that doesn't have any kind of arts. And then to have my play done there felt like I'd made it. Like, it was like, it really felt like, someone is now watching my play that hopefully will want to be an artist or a playwright or an actor someday. And hopefully I've given that back because, and I always loved as an actor going on Northwestern Ontario tours or going into rural communities that don't have the arts. I never, performing in gymnasiums or at libraries or whatever, to me, they're the best audiences because they don't have that curtain or that, if they like the play and they respond back to you, they talk to you. Like that to me is like, that's
similarly to the way you were at a hockey game at the end of the show.
And so those are always my favorite reactions, but also my favorite places to be. And I never want to forget that. I never want it to feel to someone. I never want someone to feel like they don't belong in a theater because the theater is for the people. And so we need to get back to that and to make these inclusive spaces for a variety of reasons. But like, to me is like, that's part of the work I think we have to just continue doing.
So you saw that play at 17. Was that the moment where you decided that maybe you would actually go to theater school? What was that moment for you? That was it?
Yeah, I did the Sears Drama Festival when I was in high school, and it just so happened there was a 5-year window in Kenora. I grew up in Kenora, Ontario, where there was a teacher from Toronto who knew about the Sears Drama Festival, advocated the Sears Drama Festival so the Sears Drama Festival is it's like 50 years old in Ontario and mostly serviced like the Southern Ontario, Toronto, Southern Ontario part. She lived in Northwestern Ontario, which is like, for anyone understanding how large Ontario is, it's like a 24-hour drive from Toronto to Kenora. It's on the other side. It feels like it's a whole other country. But she advocated that they come and we be part of it. And so I got to do that and be part of those, like be in the theater and as an actor, but I never saw plays. I just did these things and I thought they were great. When I saw the play, I realized that's what I want to do. And then my mom was like, no, you need to go get an education first. And
how about an education in theater?
And that's what I was like, I'm just going to go to Toronto. My mom's, you're not just going to go to Toronto. I was like, I had no plan. I was like, I'm just going to go be an actor. And so my mom does, you're not going to Toronto until you have some sort of education. So I, in Thunder Bay, went to the Confederation College, which is a college there, and I opened up the book and said, what's like acting? It was like broadcasting. Broadcasting in journalism is kind of like acting, like, you're in front of the camera and just whatever. I said, maybe I'll do that. And I got a 2-year diploma doing that, only to satisfy my mom enough so that I could then go to Toronto and become an actor. And I moved.
No way.
And I did it. I moved to Toronto. I worked at CBC on one project as kind of a light whatever and realized this would be the same thing and the same like trajectory of hard work to get to where you want to be in journalism that it would be for an actor. And so then I applied to George Brown, got in and decided, no, I want to be an actor, and then went into training. Don't know how I got there, from a small kid from Northwestern Ontario. The first 2 weeks I was in Toronto, all I did was look up. Like a guy stopped me in the street and says, "You're not from around here, are you?" And I said, "How do you know?" He says, "Because you keep looking up at all the buildings." Because I'd never seen a skyscraper above 12 stories. There were.
That's me when I'm in Toronto.
You just look up. You're like, these are so tall. How does someone even like live or work in them? Like, I'd be so scared. Like, so.
Did any of those journalism skills, broadcasting skills, serve you well in theater? Have you used?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of deadlines and writing, also like speaking on your voice. Like when we were in journal talking about that, and also fact-based, like doing research. Like we would have to do research in order to like present something. The hilarious things, we had an end of year project, and I only realized this a couple of years ago. I did a film. A very terrible film. I like filmed it. It has nothing to do with journalism. And I imagine those teachers at Confederation College were like, I don't know what to do with this kid. He's not doing journalism. I did some very bad action film, like really bad action film. And it's like 15 minutes long. It's all cut together. It's all over the place. The continuity is out the door. Like it's so, You
didn't have a script supervisor?
I had nothing. I didn't even know what that was. And I just, oh yeah, film this way. And then we'll this. And then I'll lift a gun and you'll shoot. And then you run away. And like, it's awful. But they gave me just a passing grade to get by. But it had nothing to do with journalism. And that should have been my flag. I think it was like subconsciously me saying, I'm never going to do journalism. But yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's move back into some of your writing. Thanks for sharing. This is so fun.
That's amazing.
So, circling back in a way to your first experience as an audience member, being kind of shut down, I saw that you were part of the Indigenous Black Person of Color Theater Grad Fair this year as a panelist. And I went to that panel last year, and that was just so amazing to be part of that Zoom room, mostly because most of the people I went to school with were all white. And it was just powerful to be in a space with so many people of color. Mm-hmm. And I'm so glad to have those opportunities cropping up more and more now. What are you looking forward to in the future for theater? Well, I think that,
5 years ago, the Canada Council's funding model changed. And they said to theater companies across this country, you need to be reflecting your communities back to you, whatever that means. Now, every city across any regional theater across this country has different demographics, but you have to look and say, who's in our community? Whose stories do we need to be telling? I don't need to hear another Moliere. Moliere is great. It's a classic piece of theater, and maybe that's part of your season. But what else are you doing, and whose stories are you telling? And I think we are starting to see more and more results. Like it's an amazing thing when money and resources and thought is put behind these things. You're starting to see IBPOC work appear and stories being told that haven't been told historically. And people are getting the opportunity to share and tell great stories that just are from a different perspective than what is the default of the past. And not to say that those stories aren't still good to tell. That's not it. Mm-hmm. It's about it's about making space for other people. And when someone says, we need to make space for other people, it's like, no. You just took over that space and didn't allow for other things. So to me, it's like, it's about, someone said to me one time, if you're in a room full of people and there's 8 people, you should be talking 1/8 of the time. And it was always a really great marker for me. You're in a room of 4 people. You should be 1/4 of the conversation. If you're talking the whole time, then there's a problem. And I feel the same on stages. We should be looking at the communities and inviting them in. Like, if a theater company's like, yeah, but there's revenue and this, I was like, there are tons of communities that you haven't tapped into, that you haven't invited into the space, who will buy tickets and sell out just as much. They just haven't come because they haven't seen themselves reflected back. They haven't seen their stories. They haven't been invited into these spaces. And on top of that, it's not just what's on the stage. It's also the board of directors has to look different. The leadership has to look different, because when you have leaders from different backgrounds and from different life experiences make different choices about the stories we need to tell and why. And because someone says, hey, we need to do this, why? And someone goes, oh, well, this is what we've always done. I was like, yeah, but we always have done this. Why are we not doing something different? Why are we not evolving? Why are we not telling other stories? If we've already told the story, why are we not telling a different story then? And stuff like that. So to me, is like the future. So many new leaders are IBPOC leaders and people in administration and in the decision-making roles. That's the important thing. You can fill the stage with actors and casting and all that stuff, but if IBPOC artists and arts makers aren't in the decision-making roles, it's still the power. Who's holding all the power? And I feel like there's that shift coming. And then some people saying, well, I don't want to be part of your structure. I want my own structure. And so some people denying that structure and then creating their own stuff and going, this is what I'm doing over here. I don't want that. And that's also exciting. So to me, it's like the idea of what is possible when you start opening and allowing people to tell their own stories is really, it's really exciting. It's an exciting time. And I think that there are going to be some big changes. There's obviously going to be some growing pains too. You know, you don't just do a play from a community and that community suddenly goes, oh, we're invited, we're going to come in. No, you've got 50 years of not inviting people in. It's going to take them a while to trust and come into your space. And so what are you doing outside of just the plays to welcome people in, to bring people and feel like that it's a safe space they can come in and that they're welcome and that they see themselves. So there's so much work I feel is happening. And there's lots of great allies out there doing some great work. I think sometimes we can focus on all the negatives of these things. And sometimes we just have to take a step back and like, look at all the great work that people are doing out there. And it, to me, is like, there's a resilience and also an excitement about so many people wanting to make great changes and also want to bring great work to the stage.
Something that I've been thinking about is how when you give, it might be a mandate or people a platform to share new points of view, that inspires social change, because when people see stories of different perspectives, that's what influences everyone's, movement socially. So it's so exciting to see the change that happens when you do give everyone a platform, when you do give these people a platform to get on stage, because it changes how society is thinking overall, which is so important and special.
And you're seeing it on television now. You're seeing it in films. Like, it's just starting. I heard a very prominent artistic director say, well, if diversity is what they want, I guess that's what we have to give them. I'm like, if that's the way you want it, there are two ways of looking at it.
Think about it.
You know what I mean? In other ways, it's like, we are excited to tell other stories. We've been telling these stories for 50 years. There's a bunch of stories we're not telling that we're excited to engage with. They're new artists to get to know and to open the circle. Like, you can always take the negative if you want. And to me, is like, this is an exciting time to embrace new artists. And they're not new. There's lots of people. There's a lot. There are lots of artists who have waited for this opportunity and to be given the same opportunities as others to tell their stories and to be on stages. And this is that time, hopefully.
And now you are the incoming director of new play development at Stratford. So I bet you're taking all of this with you.
Trying to, yeah.
In that. What's that been like?
Yeah, it's a big transition to go from Native Earth, which is Canada's oldest professional Indigenous theatre company, and, to work specifically with Indigenous artists, mostly. And when we can't work with Indigenous artists, there isn't people available, we go IBPOC. So we really try to, and that's always been, that isn't just me, that's been kind of what Native Earth has done since I've been a part of the company. And for me is like, the exciting thing about new play development is that, so playwrights bring their artists with them. And so if you want to get to know a community or you want an exciting artist, so you find a playwright that is writing something that you're excited about. Their artists want to work with them and they bring them in. No one's, you're not going to get in between that. And that's the exciting aspect of new play development. You get to meet new artists that you've never met before, that are not on your radar. You're in a room, you go, who is that? It's like, oh, this is so-and-so. And yeah, and he's this, and they've been collaborating for a number of years now. And I've met so many artists through that kind of collaboration. And so what ends up happening is, for me anyway, the future of new play development is how you get to know artists. And so you kind of bring an artist that isn't necessarily, they're not thinking about the Stratford Festival. They're thinking about working, on exciting new plays. So you bring an exciting new play in, that artist wants to work on it and be there. And then Stratford goes, hey, could we cast you in this or that? And next thing you know, you just have this artist working for a season at the festival in other ways, and you start a relationship. And then they can decide where they go from there. But that's the kind of how you open doors. It's the thing I find exciting about it is you open those doors not through like, hey, they're mandated changes. You actually open the door through the work. It's like, this is a great piece of work.
Right.
Want you to come work on it. The playwright wants you. We want you. Come work with us. Yeah, I would love to. And while you're here, could we cast you in this or this and that? And they go, yeah, sure, I would love that experience. And then an actor gets a season in a repertory. They're so rare now, this idea of kind of repertory season where you're in 2 or 3 plays, you're, understudying someone, you're working on something. It's a whole different skill set, and it's kind of you're there for 6 to 7 months working on several different plays, different directors, different design teams. And then suddenly you're going, do I like this? Do I want to work here? Maybe it's not for everyone, for some people, but it's an introduction and a conversation. And it is maybe someone that has maybe not felt welcome in those spaces in the past, but through the work, they get to work on something they are excited in. And then you kind of keep that going, hopefully. That's kind of what I'm hoping to do with it.
No, it's so exciting. Yeah. As outgoing artistic director at Native Earth Performing Arts, what was your proudest moment? Do you have something you can share with us?
Proudest moment. There's so many. The festival, so we have a development festival called the Wasagatchuk Begins to Dance Festival. And every year it happens in November. It's the 3rd week in November. And we bring artists from coast to coast to coast together. They get a couple days of workshop with artists, actors, dramaturgs, directors, whatever they want. We have they apply. We usually have 20 to 30 pieces that come. And then over a matter of 2 weeks, each night we do an excerpt. So there's 4 pieces on Tuesday. There's 5 pieces on Wednesday. And it's multidisciplinary. You have dance. We've had film. We've had opera. We've had theater.
Wow.
The thing I always love about that is it's one of those very rare opportunities where you're in a room with people and it's Indigenous artists working with Indigenous creators on Indigenous work for Indigenous audiences. It's just so rare. And you bring in new people. So you have a young graduate. We had a young graduate from the National Theatre School and someone from Studio 58. And they come in, they meet. One's been living in Montreal and one's out in Vancouver, and they come together and they get to meet each other. And next thing you know, midway through the festival, you're seeing them. They're all hanging out and laughing, going for coffee, and they get to know each other, and then they don't feel alone. They understand that there's a community. Ken Williams, who's, worked for many years in Saskatchewan, is now a university professor in Alberta. He had said to us at one point, there is community, and then there's the arts community. And we've always been outside of community. And the Indigenous arts community is just different than the Indigenous community. And it's exciting when we have the opportunities to be in rooms together and start talking about the work and talking about what we're doing and talking about whose work we're excited about and everything like that. And so that was always kind of it's a crazy time where we're working every day for it's 2 months, it's nonstop. But some of those nights when you get to see those artists all coming together and being in rooms together, we have a feast. We usually host a feast and we bring people together and we break bread together. And you're in a room with all these people that you don't get to see very often. And that was always for me anyways, was always the most exciting time. And then being able to support artists that we've loved and to be able to create a season of work is always, at the start of every new season when we announce the work, is always also an exciting time. To be able to say, here's the work we're going to be doing this year. And then people are like, oh, this is exciting. I'm so glad you're doing this, or this artist, or this is happening. And so that's also the other thing that I really quite loved.
I love that. Talking about the Indigenous arts community, I have both of you here on this conversation. What are you most looking forward to within that community right now?
I think for me, it's just the future possibilities. Just because you don't know what those are, but you know that they're going to be coming from your Indigenous community that are like working on these amazing different artistic forms of expression, and just like thinking about our artists that started work and they've been like building on their work over time, and then the thought of just seeing it come to fruition and supporting that regardless of how the piece ends up. So it's really hard to say what all I'm looking forward to, because I always get excited about the work that gets out into the world from our point of views, and that we're just more and more being able to stand behind the work that we want to tell, not always have it like, I guess, colonialized in a sense, or like, I don't know if that's how you should tell stories. Well, we are, so, that's who we are. Just knowing that there's platforms for these voices that haven't been heard.
How are you breaking the stereotype or the set rules of colonial theater? Like, what are some of the interesting ways that you're shifting the way you're making theater right now?
I think it's a few different ways, even just how our rehearsal models are, and like downsizing the amount of time on the work, not in a bad way, just giving them time to like rest, recuperate, depending on what the subject of that play is, but also just being there to support them with the cultural aspect, and also encouraging them that if they need to take some time, if they need a mental health day, that we can do that for them without them feeling like we're going to punish them later down the road for it. I think we're being more receptive to coming to our artists' needs, because sometimes they are taking on like work that is beautiful, tough, and just making space of going through that process and seeing it more, and just like actually listening to who they want to, artists of who they want to bring into the room without it feeling just like a close, like, like cut out from the rest of the world, and just like inviting people in. We don't always have to have closed doors, because we want to share the art. We want to, come listen to, what the conversations are, or maybe you have input, and just, not being so closed-minded about things, I think, and just approaching it differently without saying, no, this is our 10 to 6, that's it, 6 days a week, and if you can't hack it, well, we'll bring someone else in. So I'm happy that we're seeing that sort of structure that we're so used to for so many years, finally being like moved out the door. That's what I'm seeing more and excited about.
Keith, do you have any thoughts on decolonizing theater practices?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll go back to your first question about what am I excited about? On one level is like, in the last few years being, and Jennifer's been part of this, is like being connected to an international Indigenous body. Like talking to Maori artists from Aotearoa, which is New Zealand, or Australia, and just they have their stories telling, which parallel lots with colonial ideas and things that they had suffered. And those stories, and finding parallels, and being in rooms together and being excited about each other's work has been really great. The fact that theaters across the country are engaging in this work for the first time in many ways. You look at 5 years ago, and you look at the list of the plays that people were doing prior to pandemic, people were seeing very little Indigenous work being done. And now every theater, they're doing this thing where they have an Indigenous slot, which is still, I find, I'm not necessarily excited about that. I was like, just do the work. Do a couple of the plays in a season. Like that could be an exciting part of it. But at least they're doing something. And that work is being seen coast to coast to coast around that. So that's also very exciting. But also seeing leadership. There's also, talk about how we do a tour. Someone's like, how do we do an Indigenous theater tour? Like, where are all the stops? Like, how do we as a group come together, different companies? Like, you have Kevin Loring at the National Arts Centre Indigenous Theatre, which started in 2019, just prior to the pandemic. The future is very bright in Ottawa about the resources and the shows that are going to be seen there. And then how do you connect that to something that tours to Native Earth in Toronto, to Gordon Tatusis in Saskatchewan, then out to Talking Stick out in BC. Like there is we could see shows of many different artists on many different stages and support these tours, which I think is something we'd all like to see more of. And so there's an excitement there around the possibilities of how we all collaborate with each other for the future. So that's great. In terms of decolonizing, like Dr. Lindsay Lachance, who runs our Animiki program, she is looking at land dramaturgy. She's looking at like how different forms of looking at the work. How do we inform ourselves of the things we want to be working on through different ways than just sitting at a table crossing things out? like we said, shorter hours, respecting people as parents. The idea of like, Yvette Nolan always talks around this idea that it's often this triangle, the artistic director or the director's vision, and then there's a hierarchy in the room, and it's like turning it on its side, making it a circle so that everybody in the room has an equal voice, doing check-ins, checking to make sure people are okay. Sometimes we have an elder present if we're dealing with a show with some heavy material, making sure there's options and availability for people to be present in what's going on and dealing with some of the issues that may come up. So being ever present of those things. The idea of like, how do we engage with people who are outside of our own circle is also something that's being asked a lot. Like, how do we engage in community? And we can look around, see all the people in our circle. And it's like, how are we engaging outside of that circle? How are we bringing people into this circle? What is our responsibility to that? I mean, you get really busy with work where you're doing 9 to 5 at a desk. You're trying to get things done. And you forget sometimes to stand up and go outside and be at a community event, talk to people, this whatever. And people just trying to make more time for that, trying to make that a priority, because that's part of the work we should be doing. So to me, it's like, and then funding in itself, more funding to Indigenous organizations that are doing this work that have historically been underfunded, and then the opportunity for them to fail and to continue moving, not to be punished, because you look at all the training that's not happened for the last 20 or 30 years at any institution in terms of arts administration, acting, directing, all that stuff. There's hardly any Indigenous folks in those kind of training places. Then to suddenly say, we've changed the policy, we need this, we want this, these are the people we're looking for. And then people are getting vaulted into these positions. They don't get the years and years of training or jump from job to job to job. They go from a very kind of first kind of job in marketing to suddenly running an organization because someone's like, look, we've promoted someone, they're Indigenous, we're very excited about it, and that's great. But they need the support. And if they're the only person in that organization or institution, and they're surrounded by everyone else who's dominant culture or anything else, is like they don't have those supports. That's how you break it apart.
Yeah, it also takes the life experience and time to learn those things.
Just giving people that opportunity to kind of to make mistakes, to learn like other people learn, and to support them through that. I think that's how we break these things apart.
Could you go back to the idea of land dramaturgy? I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, so Lindsay does a lot. Like I've talked Christine Friday, who is a dancer, and Christine, we've worked a lot with her at Native Earth, and she has a company called Friday Creations. When she does her land dramaturgy, she dances on the land. She dances for the ancestors. She wants to be on the land and working as a dancer on the land before she shows it ever to a public. Lindsay looks at stuff as like, what are things, like when you're telling a story, what are the things that are important to that story? And what is think about how things feel, how things smell, how things touch, how it feels to be in these spaces, how to be present in your body. And she's like, these are all really important aspects of like the physical nature of the thing you're trying to tell on stage. And so she has this whole thing around how she takes someone through her process, which is, and she's a PhD, like superstar, and she's written a lot about it. So look her up. She's absolutely fantastic.
I totally am going to do that. Yeah.
She's amazing.
Thanks for sharing that.
And her birch bark, barks are beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I'll have to take a look for this. Thanks. It's so amazing how fast an hour can go, but I do want to jump back into your writing, Keith.
Sure.
So what is it about grief that draws you to explore it? Because obviously The Hours That Remain and This Is How We Got Here both deal a lot with grief.
Yeah. We are all going to suffer from grief. It's something all of us are going to experience in our life. And I think I was always afraid of it. Like when I was really young, I told someone, my mom smoked. And I saw all the commercials on television about cancer and people die of smoking. And I used to cry and just beg her I don't want you to die, Mom. I don't want you to die. And I was so afraid she was going to die. And I was waiting for her to get cancer. And she never did. She's great. She's quit smoking. And my father left when we were kids. Like my father left my mom and divorced or whatever. And he disappeared. And I was afraid I was going to lose my mother. And, it's many, many years, single mother, raising 3 kids and stuff like that. And I always was afraid I was going to lose those things. And I think that idea of like, I didn't realize this till a couple months ago. I was like, I think that I write about grief to prepare myself for when the time comes that I have to. Because to me, it's like, it's just something we don't talk about. And so many people are afraid of losing the people they love. They almost don't engage with them because they're afraid to feel the thing when their absence is there. And to me, it's like, it's the only way I have been able to really kind of open myself up to it and to understand that I feel things very deeply. I'm quite an emotional person, and it scares me. And that idea of like, what am I going to do when I lose my mother? What am I going to do when I lose my sisters? Like the people I love, my wife, like all this stuff. Like I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so part of the writing is always about what it is to go through that. And how do you get on the other side? How do you, my aunt and uncle lost both their sons to suicide. And I watched their grief. I watched them over a number of years process and understand and move through their grief. And it's still there to this day, but they have lives. They still, my uncle lives out on the West Coast. He just got remarried. He's coming down here in July. They go down to Mexico for 6 months. He read a book called Happiness Now. And he was just sitting in his grief for a number of years. And it was really, just go to see him and support him. And he read Happiness Now, and it just clicked for him. He said, I have to be like, I'm here. I exist. Mm-hmm. What is, yes, I've lost my sons, but what is next for me? Like, what is next? How do I honor them? I don't honor them by just stopping living and not doing anything and just waiting. Yeah. He says, I want to honor them by living. And he had to like lift himself up and do that thing. I was so incredibly moved by that. And also I have moments of going like, I could never do that. Like I've had so many people like, I don't know what I would do if I lost both my kids. I don't know what I would do if I lost this. I couldn't go on. And I was like, but you have to. And so I was like, how would I do that? And so part of my writing is just about asking those questions and putting that. I like a good cry, and I love making audiences cry. I want to stick my hand into your chest and squeeze that little heart of yours and remind you of our humanity. And to me, it's like, absolutely, when people cry at my plays, I just feel so good. Like I'm always like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's right. You cry tears.
Catharsis.
Because I also love making them laugh. And so there's this like,
yeah.
Everyone's like, oh, it's so funny. I'm like, yes. It's like, but you break my heart, Keith Barker. And I was like, yes, that's exactly what I want. Because life is that, right? Like, I've never laughed harder than at a funeral. It's one of those things. I've never cried harder than at a wedding, or when a baby's born. So It's like we live in this gray area of what that is. And we're all we're all stumbling in the dark about these things. And it's terrifying, but it's part of what makes us human. And when I was so recently at one of the plays, an audience member said to me, the thing I love about your play is it let me grieve publicly, but privately. She goes, I usually cry at home. She goes, she's like, I lost my sister to cancer and I cry at home. I have a little cry by myself and then I go about my day. But when I'm in the theater, other people are crying around me and I'm crying, but no one's looking at me because you cry. Everyone's like, oh, are you okay? And you suddenly, there's a tension on you. She says, but I'm in a theater and I'm able to release and have a public cry about something that I'm a great loss. She says, but I could do it privately. And I felt so relieved after leaving the theater. She goes, I just feel like this weight has been lifted off me because I could just do it with other people around me and it not be weird.
What a special share.
Yeah. And I just remember that because I was like, what is it about theater that gets me? And that's the thing. When I have a good cry or a really good laugh with a group of people together, it's not like sitting at home watching Netflix. It's like there's something in the energy that you get from that makes live theater so necessary for me.
Absolutely. I could see how This Is How We Got Here might have been inspired by your cousins.
Yeah, it was. So, my cousins passed away and I didn't write the play then. I was like, 5 years, I every Christmas go and spend time with my aunt and uncle. And then about 12 years after that, family friends, their youngest son, they had 3 kids and their youngest son took his life. And I had seen him the week before. He was really great. We talked football, like European soccer, and we talked football, and he was a Liverpool fan. And we're having this, he was just great. I thought he was going to be the next prime minister. He was a really smart kid who just had a really good head on his shoulders. And like at 16 was into politics and really was looking at how to make the world better. Like I just felt the future's so bright with this guy. His name was Daniel, which is the name of the character in The Hours That Remain. I changed the name of the character to Daniel because it was Daniel who had passed away. And one morning he got up to go to work and he rode down to the end of the street, and instead of taking a left towards work, he took a right. He went into High Park and he hung himself. And I watched their family, process their grief and how they went through that. And so it was a second family that I was now watching go through grief. And it was at that moment I went, I need to write this play. Like I need to write a play about this. And it's not, the great thing was it wasn't about my aunt and uncle, or it wasn't about Daniel and his family. There was a fictionalized version, but there are things in those plays that those families went through. And I said to my aunt and uncle, I gave it to them. I said, this doesn't see the public until you approve of it. And both of them were like, please share this story. Please tell this story. I love how you're telling it. I love the way this play resonates. And please. And my uncle came and saw the play at one point. It was very difficult for him, but he came and saw it and he loved it. So to me, it's like being able to tell that story has been hugely important to me, and also a great honor for me. I had a dear friend of mine just stop me at one point and says, thank you for normalizing mental health.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I was wondering how you came up with the allegory about the fox inside.
Yeah, it's funny. So the play has a short story about this it's called Le Petit Renard. It's about a little fox. And I had referenced it in the play, never thinking the book. It's a made-up book. And I referenced it, not really thinking about what it was going to be. I just had this idea that they would read a book together to their son growing up. Like that, so many parents that are like, I've read this book 1,000 times. My kid loves this book. Every night he asks for it, so every night we read it. And I have friends who have...
And now it's memorized.
And so I had just made up a book. One of the reasons why is like you don't want to pay is have to like ask permission to use this book name. So I was like, I made up a book. But then the more I wrote the play, the more I realized like, I don't know what this book is about. And so I took a month off of the playwriting and I just wrote the story. And I wrote the kid's story, Le Petit Renard, about the fox. And then it just resonates. It's about the play. It's about like a fox who forgets his own story. And at the end, he jumps off the edge of the earth with the sun and is never seen again. And that idea of like, it just kind of echoes the play in a small way. But then, and then the play, the hope. But the next day, everything happened again. The sun rose and stories were told because the fox didn't realize that he's not just responsible for his story, that we carry your story with us. Like the people who love you also carry your story. And so that idea I just kept writing it. And then people were like, where do I buy this book? I said, oh, it's not a book you haven't bought. Like, I wrote it. And they're like, you
have to buy my play. You can buy a copy of my play, and then you can have the book.
So I'm actually in the process of talking to a publisher about making it into a children's book.
Oh, really?
So it's right now because every time we do a talk back, someone asks me like, so the story about the fox is it an Indigenous story? I was like, well, no, it is. I wrote the story, and there's like,
I wrote it.
There's like, is it this kind of story? Like, where can is this book published? I was like, no, it's made up, so that has always been a really nice aspect of the little fox story. And then what I did was it wasn't going to be in the play. I was just going to write it. And then I loved the story so much I wanted it in the play. And so then I separated in each one of the 4 characters in the play. Each one gets an opportunity to speak a part of it. And to me, it was like, the way the actors have always done it is that we always say it's like it's 5 years after the anniversary of of Craig's passing, who's the young boy. I said, and everybody is, gone to counselors. Everyone's in a really good place. And so it still gets me. They meet on the anniversary and read the story, that idea of honoring a young man in a positive way. And so they all, and You know, at the Shaw production, that's how they warmed up every day. They all came together, stood in a circle, and each of them told the story to each other. That idea that on the anniversary, those characters would do that. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I understand that one of my sister's friends passed away by suicide, and every day, every September 26th is you can't help but try and honor that person's life or think about them. If you don't think about them every few days, you know, like the idea of their story moving on through other people is so true.
Yeah, and so many people have I've been in couple of the productions of the play now. People have shared with me that they've lost people, that they, the last production, one of the actors is like, one of my best friends took his life. And so I get emotional because when we tell the story of the fox, when we come together and honor it, it's like me honoring my friend. It's like me honoring my loved one, my cousin, my dad, and I just remember there is something about how we honor those who we've lost in a way that is actually I just find really quite touching. So, yeah.
I just wanted to add, that's, and I was fortunate enough to read that script as well. It was just beautiful, the story of the fox, because what brings me comfort is that it's just little things that remind us about the ones that we lost, that they are surrounding us in a unique way that we see it. So whether it is we see this animal and we have an instant connection and thinking it's our loved one, or even just like, and this may be a dumb reference, but just Bob's Burgers. Linda was peeling potatoes and she found a potato that looked like her dad. It's like, the kids never met Grandfather Potato. Look, and she took it with her everywhere, and it was just, it's those things that could be more than one that is always a reminder that, they're never gone, and it's like they make an appearance with us in the things that make sense or just surprise. That way they're always just there, even if it's in the form of a vegetable, animal, cloud. It's comforting. It's like they're giving you a sneak peek. Don't worry, I'm not really gone. And that's what I find. Yeah,
I'm here. I'm still beautiful. With you, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's so many, people that haven't read the play. The mother sees a fox in the woods and starts to believe that the fox is her son coming back to tell her he's okay. And that's so many people I know share the story of, like, when my father passed away, he loved blue jays. And for like a month, 2 blue jays came and just every morning were on our perch, and they'd never been there before. And someone's like, I think it was my dad just saying, hey, I'm okay. And so many people have those stories of nature or something that they see as a recognition that that person hasn't left. And I think that there's something so comforting in that idea that the ancestors are with us all the time, that they have our backs, and that they're not that far away, that, and that was part of the reason why I wanted to have the fox in the play, is that idea of that presence, and to have people go, like, because everyone, that's the other question at every talkback. So do you think, so is the fox Craig? And I was like, I don't know, is he? And
it's up to you.
Everybody asks a question, right? And I was like, I think it depends on what you think and what you believe, It's like, I love that question, because to me it's like, I don't ever want to answer it.
Mm. In your acknowledgements, you wrote that Bob White and Gil Garrett gave you the first and second biggest notes on this show. You didn't write what they were, but I wondered, would you share?
Sure.
Mostly because I usually ask what's a piece of advice, like the best piece of advice you received anyway. So I felt like that wrapped into
absolutely. So interesting enough, for those who don't know, I've taken over for Bob White. So I did the Playwrights Retreat at Stratford, and Bob read the play and gave me the best note that changed everything. His note to me is, why is the father not angry? In a prior version, the father was very kind, very gentle, very, he was just processing, but he never got angry. And in the play, the son calls the uncle, and the uncle goes out to go fishing with him and finds the boy. And the father, everything clicked around what the father's holding, and the questions that you would ask is like, why didn't he call me? Why didn't my son call me? like, you know, and gave Paul as the character, gave Paul this purpose of like, why wouldn't my son, I'm his dad, he's supposed to call me.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then the uncle, he's like, I don't know. I don't know why he didn't call you. Is it, did he say anything? Was he angry at me? He's like, no, he didn't say anything like that. And then there's a tension between, because they're best friends. They've been best friends their whole lives. So everything changed in the dynamics of the characters, but also the drive of Paul and why, what is the thing that the weight that's on him, outside of losing your son, and where does that anger? And so as soon as Bob said that, I went back and it changed everything. And the play is so much, it's just, Paul has this drive now that is just very clear.
Yeah, it's the leftover questions that you don't get answers to that eat away at you.
The what ifs, right? Everyone goes into the, well, what if I'd been home earlier? What if I had done this? What if I had said I love you that morning? All that stuff. And then the second note is Gil. So Gil Garrett is the artistic director at the Blythe Festival. And the play is non-linear. And so it's kind of backwards in a lot of ways. And so you still get what happens, but it takes a bit of, someone's like, what? Sorry, what's happening? And I did that on purpose to kind of keep people, it's almost like a guessing game of what's happening. But Gil said to me, because it's non-linear, we need something to hang that off of. We need something that is linear that kind of happens through the play, and then everything else can go wherever it needs to go. And so the men, throughout the play, the men are looking for Lucille. Lucille's the mom. So the two men, the Paul and Jim, who are the father and the uncle, and we see them periodically. They come in, then they disappear, and then a scene happens. And then they come in again, and they're with flashlights. They've got their outdoor gear on. They're calling out for Lucille, and they're trying to find her. And I put that throughout the play, and that is linear until get to the end of the play, and it catches up. So the last scene of the play is an extension of that scene. So they're looking. And at the last scene, Paul finds her. And so that was, for me, it also just gave me some kind of structure. And then afterwards, then the Fox story also became something linear. So there were just these there's these two things that are happening in the play that are linear and everything else is out. So people do feel a sense of that it's moving in a direction by those two little pieces. And that was Gil, who was just like, hey, I think this is what you need. It doesn't need to be much, but maybe it's just that little something that goes through. And I mean, those are those kind of notes that you're like, you go away going, I don't know what he's doing. Well, actually, actually, that's really smart. Actually, that's a really good note. It's like you have to process it, get through it, and then you.
So those are the two notes that got you to be a finalist for the Governor General's Award for English Drama.
Yes. Yep. They definitely helped. That's for sure. I mean, I have 100 versions of this play. And both of those notes propelled to scripts that I went, it's like finding the missing puzzle piece and you snap it in. You're like, there it is. That everything makes sense now. And then so yeah.
This has just been amazing. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for inviting Keith. I feel so lucky to have been given the chance to create this podcast because, as you're saying, we're all connected, and nothing has shown me more than that than going through the process of interviewing and doing these conversations for Stage Right, because there's just so many layers of connectivity between all the artists. So thank you both so much for your time. And
my pleasure, and thank you, Jennifer. Just big fan, and I love what you're doing at Gordon Tatusis, and yeah, I just really appreciate you considering me or inviting me into this. And thank you, Sierra, for your patience and all that stuff. So thanks. It's just been a blast.
Problem.
It has been. Thank you, Sarah and Keith. I mean, your play was the reason why I wanted to not give up on playwriting. It's just, that's like one of the number one things of why, like, so many wonderful people out there, but I didn't think I was going to continue writing until I read your play, met you, and saw the work, and ignited that passion to keep working hard, no matter how difficult, tough, or lovely the material is. So thank you, and thanks again, Sierra, for giving me the opportunity to tell him that through podcast.
I love it. All right, we'll talk to you all later. See you around.
Bye.
See you.
On today's program, we sat down with playwrights Jennifer Dawn Bishop and Keith Barker. We discussed Keith's shows, This Is How We Got Here, and The Hours That Remain. If you're interested in reading his work, you can find his writing online for purchase through Playwrights Canada Press. Stage Right is brought to you by the Globe Theatre in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada Council for the Arts, my associate producers Tanner Zare and Riley Hardwick, who wrote all of our awesome music for the podcast, Chris Haynes, our sound engineer, and me, your host, Sierra Haynes. If you want to keep up with our theatre online, find us on Instagram at Globe Theatre Live. And if you want to see what I'm up to, you can find me online at The Sinking Canoe. Thanks for listening, and please exit stage right.